You know, when people ask me, how do I really know if we're just incompatible? The very first place I tell them to look is their core values. Because values aren't preferences, they're not hobbies, they're not little quirks you can laugh about. Values are the ground you're standing on, and if the ground underneath you is different from the ground underneath the person you're building with, sooner or later, the cracks are going to show. You can love each other deeply, you can be attracted to each other, you can even have good memories together, but if your values don't line up, your relationship is built on sand. Think about it this way: if one person sees family as everything, but the other sees family as an obligation, that's not just a difference in opinion, that's a difference in world view. It will show up in how you celebrate holidays, how you raise children, how you spend your weekends, and even in how you make decisions. One person will feel like they're constantly pulling the other along, and the other will feel like they're being forced into a mold they never agreed to. And when that happens, no amount of love songs or romantic gestures can erase the tension that builds in those everyday choices. Or maybe one person values financial security, budgeting, and building stability, while the other values living in the moment, spending freely, and not worrying about tomorrow. At first, that might even feel exciting. The saver admires the spontaneity, and the spender admires the discipline. But give it a year, give it 5, give it 10, and what once felt exciting starts to feel exhausting. The saver begins to feel resentful that their hard work is being undone, and the spender feels suffocated by constant rules. It's not that either person is wrong, it's that they're not compatible. They're moving in opposite directions, and love can't bridge that gap forever. The hardest part about this is we convince ourselves that love is enough. We say things like, if we really care about each other, we'll figure it out. And sure, compromise is part of any relationship, but compromise is not the same thing as cutting away pieces of who you are to fit into someone else's life. If your values are your compass, then bending them for someone else means you're walking without direction, and eventually you won't even recognize yourself anymore. That's not compromise, that's losing yourself. And here's the truth: values are revealed in action, not just words. Someone can say they value honesty, but if they hide things from you, if they manipulate the truth, their actions just exposed their real values. Someone can say they value respect, but if they belittle you in public or dismiss your feelings in private, their actions speak louder. And when you ignore those red flags because you hope they'll change, what you're really doing is trying to negotiate with reality. Reality doesn't negotiate. It just shows up later, stronger and more painful. When two people share core values, conflict doesn't disappear, but it becomes navigable. It becomes a disagreement you can work through because you're both aiming in the same direction. When values don't align, every disagreement feels like a war. You're not just fighting about what to do tonight, you're fighting about who you are at your core. That's why it feels draining, why it feels hopeless, why you leave conversations feeling smaller instead of stronger. At the end of the day, love is the feeling that draws you together, but values are the glue that keeps you together. Without them, you're not building a future, you're just passing time. And if you're passing time with someone who doesn't share your values, then deep down, you already know. You're trying to plant seeds in soil that will never grow. You can tell a lot about a relationship by the way you feel after spending time with someone. The right relationship doesn't just take from you, it gives back. It's not about everything being perfect, it's about leaving each interaction with more strength, more peace, more clarity than you had before. But when you're in an incompatible relationship, the opposite happens. You don't walk away feeling energized, you walk away feeling drained. And that slow, steady drain doesn't just affect the relationship, it seeps into every area of your life. Think about it. You get off work after a long day, and instead of looking forward to seeing your partner, there's this heaviness in your chest, because you know the conversations will be sharp, or the silence will be cold, or the smallest thing will set off another round of tension. You tell yourself it's just a season, or maybe you're just tired, but deep down you feel it. This person doesn't refill you, they empty you, and over time that becomes the new normal. You start accepting exhaustion as love. You start believing that relationships are supposed to feel like work without reward. That's the danger. When you're drained consistently, you don't even realize how much it's costing you. You stop pursuing your passions. You stop dreaming as big. You stop laughing as often. And you convince yourself you're just in a rough patch, when in reality, you're being slowly depleted by a connection that's never giving back what you're pouring in. The truth is, real love should add, not subtract. It should lift, not weigh down. Even in struggles, even in disagreements, there should be a sense that you're in this together, that you're carrying each other, not competing with each other. The wrong relationship feels like you're constantly trying to pull someone uphill while they're pulling you back down, and after a while your spirit gets tired, your heart gets heavy. You start asking yourself questions like, why do I feel more alone with this person than I do by myself? Sometimes it shows up in small ways, like how you feel guilty for needing rest because they make you feel lazy, or how you bite your tongue in conversations because you're tired of the backlash, or how you walk on eggshells because peace only exists when you shrink yourself. Other times, it's bigger. Your confidence drops, your joy fades, your entire sense of self begins to dim. That's not love, that's not partnership, that's slow erosion disguised as commitment. Here's the thing. Healthy relationships are not about constant highs and butterflies. That's not sustainable. What they are about is consistency, stability, and support. It's about being able to exhale around someone instead of holding your breath. It's about feeling safe, not just physically, but emotionally. If you don't have that, if you're always bracing for the next letdown, then you're not in a relationship. You're in survival mode. And survival mode will wear you down until you've got nothing left to give, not to them, not to yourself, not to your future. So let me say this clearly. Love that costs you your peace is too expensive. No amount of companionship is worth the loss of your joy, your energy, or your self-respect. Because the right person won't drain you, they'll strengthen you. And when you finally experience that, you'll realize that love was never supposed to make you weaker. It was meant to make you stronger. One of the clearest signs of incompatibility isn't about how you feel today. It's about where you're headed tomorrow. You can have chemistry, you can have passion, you can even have history, but if your vision for the future doesn't align, what you really have is an expiration date. Because love isn't just about who you're with now, it's about who you're becoming together. And if your paths are pulling in opposite directions, eventually the distance between you won't just be emotional, it'll be reality. Think about it. One person dreams of settling down, building a home, and raising a family, while the other dreams of traveling the world with no strings attached. At first, that difference might seem exciting, even complimentary. One brings stability, the other brings adventure, but sooner or later, those dreams collide. The one who longs for roots feels neglected, and the one who craves freedom feels trapped. And in that tension, resentment grows, not because either dream is wrong, but because they're not compatible together. Or maybe one of you is deeply committed to building a career, climbing the ladder, and creating financial security, while the other values a slower, simpler life with less pressure. Both lifestyles can be fulfilling. But if you can't agree on what success looks like, you'll spend your days pulling against each other. One will always feel like the other doesn't have enough drive, and the other will always feel like they're being pushed too hard. And when that happens, it doesn't matter how much you love each other. You'll always feel like you're walking out of step. This is why shared vision matters so much. Because when two people don't agree on the future, every present decision becomes a battle. Where to live, how to spend money, whether to have children, what role faith plays in your lives, these aren't small details. These are the map for your journey. And if your maps don't point in the same direction, one of two things will happen. Either someone will have to abandon their map, or you'll both keep following your own until you end up in two completely different places. Neither outcome builds a lasting partnership. And here's the hard part. We often ignore this sign in the beginning. Why? Because the early days are about feelings. You're caught up in attraction, in excitement, in possibility. You don't think about 5 years from now or 10. You're too focused on how good it feels in the moment. But feelings don't build futures. Choices do. And when your choices aren't aligned, time doesn't solve the problem. It exposes it. The healthiest relationships are built on shared vision. That doesn't mean you have to want the exact same career or hobby, but it does mean you're moving toward the same horizon. You both want to grow in the same direction. You both see the future not as my plan versus your plan, but as our plan. That kind of alignment creates peace. It creates stability. It creates confidence that no matter what storms come, you're rowing in the same boat toward the same shore. So ask yourself, when you picture your life 5, 10, 20 years from now, do you see them standing beside you? And more importantly, when they picture their life, do they see you? If the answer isn't clear, then the relationship isn't either. Because love without a shared future isn't a partnership. It's just a temporary pause along the way, and you deserve more than temporary. It's easy to look at a relationship and think the number of fights tells you everything, but it's not about how often you argue, it's about how you argue. Because conflict is a part of every relationship. Two different people with two different perspectives are bound to clash at some point. That's normal. What separates a healthy relationship from an incompatible one isn't whether disagreements happen. It's whether respect is still present in the middle of them. When respect is missing, arguments stop being about solving problems and start being about tearing each other down. Instead of listening, there's dismissing. Instead of understanding, there's belittling. Instead of hearing your feelings, there's ignoring them like they don't matter. And when that pattern repeats itself, you stop feeling like you're in a partnership. You start feeling like you're in a competition where the only goal is to win, even if it means the relationship loses. Think about how that feels in practice. You open up about something that bothers you, and instead of leaning in, they roll their eyes. Instead of validating your feelings, they tell you you're too sensitive. Instead of working with you to find a solution, they turn it into an attack on your character. Over time, you learn it's not safe to speak up. You learn that silence is easier than honesty because honesty just gets you hurt. And the moment you stop feeling safe to share your voice, you stop feeling connected. Respect in communication isn't about always agreeing. It's about making space for each other's perspective. It's about saying, I may not feel the same way you do, but I care enough to listen and try to understand. Without that, love gets drowned out by ego. The relationship becomes a cycle of misunderstandings that never actually resolve, just get buried until the next explosion. And here's the thing, when someone doesn't respect your voice, it eventually makes you doubt the value of your voice altogether. You start questioning your feelings, you second guess your instincts, you shrink yourself to avoid conflict, and in the process, you lose pieces of who you are. That's what incompatibility does. It slowly erodes your identity under the weight of constant dismissal. On the flip side, when respect is there, even arguments can draw you closer. You can disagree, but you still feel heard. You can be frustrated, but you still feel valued. You can walk away from conflict with clarity, not confusion, because you know the goal was to solve the issue, not to attack each other. That kind of respect builds trust, and trust is the foundation that keeps love steady. If you find yourself in a relationship where your words bounce off walls, where your feelings are minimized, where conversations turn into battlegrounds instead of bridges, that's not just a rough patch. That's a sign you're fundamentally mismatched. Because real compatibility means you don't just love each other, you communicate in a way that protects that love. And if the way you communicate keeps breaking it down, the relationship will never stand the test of time. At the end of the day, love without respect is noise, and no matter how strong the feelings are, if respect isn't present in how you speak and listen to each other, then all you're building is a fragile bond that will eventually shatter. One of the most overlooked signs of incompatibility is when emotional intimacy feels one-sided. You know the feeling. You're always the one opening up, always the one sharing your heart, always the one trying to bridge the distance. And yet, the other person remains closed off, guarded, or unwilling to meet you at the same level. At first, you may excuse it. You tell yourself they just need more time, or they express love differently, or maybe they weren't raised to talk about their feelings. But after a while, it stops feeling like patience and starts feeling like loneliness inside the very relationship you're trying to nurture. Emotional intimacy is more than just talking. It's the willingness to be vulnerable. It's not just telling each other about your day. It's about revealing the fears, the doubts, the dreams, and the insecurities that live beneath the surface. It's about saying, "Here's who I am," unfiltered, and trusting that the other person won't use it against you. When one person does all the giving and the other does all the withholding, the balance becomes unbearable, because you can't build closeness with walls, and you can't build trust with silence. Think about how draining it feels to constantly pour out your thoughts and feelings, only to be met with half-hearted responses. You share your struggles, and they change the subject. You talk about your dreams, and they shrug. You bring your heart to the table, and they leave theirs locked away. Over time, that doesn't just feel disappointing. It feels devaluing. You start to wonder, am I asking for too much? Do my needs even matter? Is this what love is supposed to feel like? And the sad truth is, you start lowering your standards because you're afraid of losing the relationship altogether. But the reality is, love without emotional intimacy is just surface-level attachment. It's proximity without connection. Two people can live in the same house, share the same bed, and still feel worlds apart. And when you're the one always trying to close the gap, eventually you burn out. You can't carry the weight of both hearts in a relationship. You can't force someone to open up. You can't keep giving when the flow never comes back your way. And here's where incompatibility shows itself. Some people genuinely want deep emotional connection, while others are either unwilling or unable to go there. It doesn't make one person better than the other, but it does mean they're mismatched. Because you can't thrive in a relationship where your emotional needs are consistently unmet. Love requires reciprocity. It requires effort on both sides. It requires two people willing to step into the discomfort of vulnerability for the sake of building something real. When that reciprocity is missing, the relationship feels lopsided. You're not partners. You're caretaker and avoider. You're the one carrying the emotional labor, while the other reaps the benefits of your effort without contributing back. That's not compatibility, that's imbalance. An imbalance always leads to cracks that no amount of wishing can fix. The truth is, emotional intimacy is the glue that holds relationships together when the excitement fades and life gets hard. Without it, you don't have a safe place to land. You don't have someone who really knows you. And you don't have the depth that makes love last. And if you've been the only one carrying that weight, then deep down you already know it's not sustainable, because love can't survive on one heart doing all the work. One of the most painful realizations in a relationship is when you notice that you feel lonelier with the person you're with than you ever did when you were on your own. And it's confusing because on the surface, it doesn't make sense. How can you feel alone when there's someone right there beside you? But that's exactly what happens in an incompatible relationship. Presence without connection isn't comfort, it's emptiness. And when that emptiness grows, it can be even harder to carry than being single. You see, real connection isn't just about physical closeness. It's about emotional closeness. It's about being seen, being heard, and being understood. When those things are missing, the relationship starts to feel like a crowded silence. You sit at the same table, but you're not sharing a meal. You sit in the same room, but you're not sharing conversation. You lie in the same bed, but your hearts are miles apart. And that distance is so much heavier than any physical distance could ever be. Over time, this loneliness seeps into your spirit. You stop sharing your wins because they don't celebrate them. You stop sharing your struggles because they don't hold space for them. You stop sharing your thoughts because you're tired of being ignored or misunderstood. And without realizing it, you start to pull inward. You learn to carry everything on your own while still calling it a partnership. But deep down, you know, it's not partnership, it's isolation with a title. And here's the thing, loneliness inside a relationship is more damaging than loneliness outside of one. Because at least when you're single, the silence is honest. At least when you're single, the space you feel is real. But in a relationship where you feel unseen, the silence is a betrayal. The distance is a reminder that you're giving your heart to someone who doesn't know how to hold it. And that ache cuts deeper than simply being alone ever could. The tragedy is that many people stay in this kind of relationship because they fear the idea of being by themselves. They tell themselves, at least I'm not alone. But the truth is, they are alone, just in the most painful way possible. Because being alone in your own company gives you the chance to heal, to grow, to rebuild. Being alone in a relationship keeps you stuck, keeps you questioning, keeps you hoping for change that rarely comes. And let's be honest, love was never meant to feel like invisibility. Love was never meant to make you doubt your worth or wonder if your presence even matters. Love was never meant to make you feel like a guest in your own relationship. The right relationship doesn't make you feel lonelier. It makes you feel fuller. It doesn't just fill the space beside you, it fills the space within you. So, if you've found yourself lying awake at night, next to someone, and still feeling like you're carrying life completely on your own, pay attention. That's not just a phase. That's not just stress. That's incompatibility revealing itself in the most undeniable way. And you deserve more than someone's body in the room. You deserve someone's heart in the room. Because the clearest sign of all is this: when their presence deepens your loneliness, their absence will only set you free.